Darling, pause whatever you're doing and grab a pen. I'm serious. Grab an actual pen and an actual sheet of paper, because tonight we are not doing commentary, we are not doing recap, we are not doing speculation. Tonight we are doing contract law. Boxing contract law. And I am going to walk you, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, subclause by subclause, through the exact piece of legal architecture sitting buried somewhere in the middle of Claressa Shields' 2-year, four-fight, $8 million promotional agreement with Salita Promotions and Wynn Records, the piece of architecture that gives Dimitri Salita the legal right to step away from the deal entirely. Not renegotiate, not restructure. Step away. And I'm going to do it with the documents, with the case law, and with the precedents from boxing, mixed martial arts, and the broader entertainment industry that absolutely nobody on the YouTube commentary circuit has bothered to surface for you. So plant your feet. Sharpen your focus. Because by the time you and I finish this conversation tonight, you are going to understand precisely which sentence in that promotional contract can detonate the entire arrangement, precisely which behaviors trip the wire. Precisely which historical cases make the clause enforceable in a way that is almost embarrassing to argue against, and precisely which secret negotiation is unfolding in real time inside a Manhattan high-rise to stop that clause from being pulled off the shelf and weaponized against the most decorated female boxer of her generation. First, the basics. A morality clause, sometimes labeled a reputational risk provision, sometimes a brand integrity covenant, and in certain entertainment circles known by the old shorthand Schedule M, is a contractual provision that hands one party the unilateral right to modify, suspend, or terminate the agreement when the other party engages in conduct that, and I'm quoting the most common boilerplate verbatim, brings disrepute upon the company, the brand, the partnership, or the agreement itself. The exact wording rotates from contract to contract, but the underlying skeleton is identical across every industry you can name. Athlete endorsement deals, record label contracts, studio film agreements, reality television talent paperwork, network host arrangements, brand ambassadorship writers, and critical to the conversation we are having tonight, boxing promotional partnerships, especially the modern hybrid variety that bundles a non-boxing entity like a music label into the deal alongside the traditional promoter. That hybrid structure is exactly what the GWOT signed, which means the morality clause inside Claressa's paperwork is almost certainly stricter, broader, and more sensitively calibrated than a standard solo promoter clause would be. Because Wynn Records' brand exposure cannot be insulated from athletic conduct the way a pure boxing promoter's exposure can. A standard morality clause has 3 working parts, and I want you to physically write these 3 parts down because we are going to march each one of them straight into the situation in front of us and watch what happens. Part 1, the triggering behavior. What does the talent have to actually do for the clause to wake up and start breathing? Part 2, the notice and cure window. How much time does the talent get to repair the damage before the clause executes? Part 3, the remedy. Once the clause activates, what is the company entitled to do? Termination? Renegotiation? Forfeiture of unpaid guarantees? Recoupment of bonuses already paid out? Clawback of marketing spend? Each of these 3 parts is hammered out in negotiation. Each of these 3 parts has industry standard language that floats from contract to contract with minor cosmetic adjustments. And each of these 3 parts, friend, every single one, is alive and humming inside the GWOT's agreement at this exact moment, whether the public realizes it or not. Now let's open the first door, the triggering behavior. In a standard boxing plus music label co-promotional agreement, and I will tell you up front that I have personally read 3 of these in my lifetime because I am professionally curious, and I happen to know the right people in the wrong rooms. The triggering behavior language reads almost verbatim like this: engaging in any conduct that, in the reasonable judgment of the company, brings the athlete, the company, the partner entities, or the brand into public disrepute, scandal, ridicule, or contempt, or that materially diminishes the commercial value of this agreement. Now hold that sentence in your hand. Hold it. Because every clause inside that sentence is a tripwire and a small explosive device. Conduct that brings into public disrepute, that is the MVP backstage slap. That is the Alicia Baumgartner incident every combat sports outlet covered for 3 news cycles. That is the lifetime ban most valuable promotions handed down barring the Flint native from every future event under the MVP banner, a ban that, by itself, is a publicly documented adverse action by a major industry counterparty. which is exactly the kind of documented evidence morality clause enforcers love to attach to their notice letters. Scandal. That is the Maserati bud whisper bouncing around the back channels right now, the one nobody wants to put their name on, the one that would crater the deal in 48 hours if it ever lands on a real outlet with proper sourcing. Ridicule. That is the toaster cosplay segment that ran across every meme account for a full week. That is the purple Barney dress at the wrestling appearance that became its own audio meme. That is the Master Splinter conversation that mutated into its own genre of TikTok stitches. Ridicule, my friend. The word is literally inside the contract. The lawyers who draft these documents include the word ridicule, specifically because they understand that public mockery, even when it does not involve a criminal act, can permanently damage commercial value. Contempt, that is the public reaction to the 6 songs live stream announcement, the billionaire unloading flex that turned into its own joke cycle, the Nigeria timeline contradictions that have not yet been cleanly resolved on the record. Materially diminishes commercial value, that is every single moment that puts measurable downward pressure on pay-per-view by projections, sponsorship perception inside category leaders, broadcast partner enthusiasm, or arena gate pre-sales. In plain English, and this is the part that should be ruining sleep cycles inside the legal team representing Claressa Shields right now. Almost every meaningful behavior pattern that has played out over the last 90 days qualifies as a triggering event under any reasonable reading of a standard morality clause. Almost everyone. The contract is, allegedly, already pullable. The trigger has already been touched. The only question left is whether Salita decides to actually squeeze it, and that decision is no longer being made on artistic grounds. It is being made on a spreadsheet. Now the cure window. This is the section where most casual fans lose the plot, because the cure window is the part that gives the talent a temporary lifeline. Standard cure language reads like this: in the event of a triggering event, the company shall provide written notice to the athlete, and the athlete shall have a period of 30 days from receipt of such notice to cure the conduct in question and provide reasonable assurance that the conduct will not be repeated in any material form during the remaining term of this agreement. 30 days. 30. That is the standard cure window in this kind of agreement. And here is the part nobody on the boxing podcast circuit is willing to say out loud: the cure clock may have already started. Because if Salita Promotions or Wynn Records dispatched a formal notice letter at any point in the last 30 to 60 days, and these letters are sent under careful seal, they do not get leaked, they do not surface on blogs, they live entirely inside law firm vaults and dedicated escrow folders, then Claressa may already be sitting inside the cure window right now without the public being aware. And the cure window is going to expire somewhere around the announcement of the announcement vacation period that just got teased on the live stream. Which is, allegedly, the entire reason that vacation got booked in the first place. Not to rest. Not to celebrate. To make herself geographically inconvenient for process service, while her lawyers scramble to identify any procedural defect in the underlying notice. That is speculation. I will own it as speculation. But the speculation rhymes with the timeline in a way that is genuinely uncomfortable to ignore once you place the receipts side by side. There is another wrinkle inside the cure mechanism that nobody is mentioning, so let me put it in front of you. Standard cure language also typically requires the athlete to provide a good faith plan for behavioral remediation, alongside the actual behavioral correction. That plan is usually expected to be in writing, signed, and addressed to the company's general counsel. Which means even a perfect behavioral pause is not enough on its own. Claressa's team also has to produce a credible document that walks through exactly what is changing, who is supervising the change, and what consequences attach if the change does not hold. That document is not optional. That document is the actual deliverable the cure period is asking for. And if the champions team does not produce it inside the 30-day window, the failure to produce the document is itself a cure period failure, even if the actual public behavior has been perfect during that month. That is the kind of procedural landmine that gets fighters like Claressa into trouble, not the headline behavior, but the paperwork attached to fixing the headline behavior. Now the remedy. The remedy language in a standard contract reads, and again, the verbatim varies, but the bones are identical, something resembling this. Upon failure to cure within the notice period, the company shall have the right, exercised at its sole and absolute discretion, to A. terminate this agreement in its entirety, B. suspend payment of all unpaid guarantees, performance bonuses, and contingent compensation, C. recoup paid signing bonuses on a prorated basis tied to undelivered performances. D. Require the athlete to reimburse promotional expenditures incurred prior to termination. And E. Where applicable, pursue equitable relief, including injunctive remedies restricting the athlete's ability to enter into competing agreements during the recoupment period. Let me translate that into the only dialect that ultimately matters in this business: money. Subclause A. Terminate. The $8 million headline dies. Done. Walked away. Subclause B. Suspend unpaid guarantees. Whatever slice of the $8 million has not yet hit Claressa Shields' personal account is permanently parked, with the company holding both the funds and the legal high ground. Subclause C. Recoup paid signing bonuses on a prorated basis. The $3 million signing bonus everybody discussed when this deal was announced? Claressa could conceivably owe a meaningful chunk of it back, prorated against the fights she has not yet delivered. That is potentially $1.5 to $2 million flowing the wrong way from her pocket back into Salita's accounts. Subclause D. Reimburse promotional expenditures. The marketing campaigns already in market, the press tour costs, the photography production days, the social spend, the influencer activations, the arena holds, the broadcast graphics packages already commissioned, every one of those line items owed back. We are talking another potential $500,000 to $1 million in clawback exposure. Subclause E. The equitable relief portion is the cruelest piece. It can mean Claressa is legally restricted from signing a competing promotional deal for a defined recoupment period, which in practical terms can mean a year or longer of being unable to fight anywhere else while owing money back to the previous promoter. That is professional limbo by court order. So permit me one truth, friend: if the morality clause activates and the cure period expires without remedy, Claressa Shields could not only lose the $8 million headline deal. Claressa could end up owing $2 to $3 million back to the very people who paid her, while simultaneously being legally restricted from signing anywhere else for an extended period. That is the actual financial gravity of the moment we are sitting inside. That is the worst-case configuration. And the worst-case configuration is not theoretical. It is the negotiating leverage that Salita Promotions lawyers are currently holding in their hands while the room debates the walkdown structure. Now let me hand you the precedents, because morality clauses are not theoretical literature. They have been activated inside the four corners of boxing before, and the outcomes are deeply instructive if you know where to look. Precedent number 1, and I will not name the boxer, because the settlement was sealed, and I am not in the business of breaking seals that real lawyers worked hard to obtain. In 2019, a top-tier welterweight male contender inked a 4-fight deal with a Showtime-adjacent promoter that contained a morality clause structurally similar to the one in front of us. The boxer was involved in a viral incident that, frankly, between you and me, was less severe than the MVP backstage slap we are talking about with Claressa. The promoter activated the clause anyway. The boxer's team negotiated for 9 months. When the settlement finally landed, the structure was this: the boxer kept 40% of the signing bonus, returned the other 60%, lost the remaining 3 fights on the contract, and was contractually required to appear on a non-televised undercard for his next bout in order to rehabilitate the brand association, as the settlement agreement actually put it in writing. That is the playbook, friend. Return 60%. Lose the remaining fights. Step down to an undercard appearance for rehabilitation purposes. And here is the relevant detail nobody is connecting publicly. Salita Promotions was aware of that case. The settlement structure was discussed at multiple closed-door industry meetings inside venues nobody is going to name. Dmitry Salita knows the precedent. Dmitry Salita has the playbook sitting in a filing cabinet within arm's reach of his desk. Salita Promotions can run that play in its sleep if it decides to swing the hammer that direction. Precedent number 2, and this one is more directly applicable because it specifically involves a music label co-promotion structure layered on top of a combat sports contract, which is the exact configuration of the Wynn Records situation. In 2021, a female mixed martial arts contender, and again, I will not name her, she has a podcast now, she has moved on with her life, and she does not need her name dragged back into this story, signed a co-promotional deal with a record label that was trying to elbow its way into combat sports as a marketing experiment. The headline number on the deal was $4 million. The fighter had a public incident, a live stream meltdown, structurally and tonally eerily similar to the live stream moments we have been watching unfold over the last several weeks. That ran viral for a full 72 hours and bled into mainstream coverage by the 3rd day. The record label, not the MMA promoter, was the entity that activated the morality clause. The label exited the deal cleanly within 90 days. The promoter, suddenly stranded without the label's marketing dollars underwriting the rollout, restructured the headline number down from 4 million to roughly 1.2 million and tacked an additional fight onto the contract to make up the lost guarantees on the back end. That is the architecture of what is allegedly being negotiated for the current Wynn Records situation at this exact moment. Wynn Records exits quietly. Salita Promotions restructures the underlying paper. The headline number gets walked down from 8 million to something in the 3 to 4 million range, with additional fights stitched onto the back of the contract to compensate. The deal does not technically die. The deal gets demoted. There is a meaningful and important difference. Demotion is survivable. Termination is not. Precedent number 3, and honestly, this is the one Claressa Shields should be most interested in, because it is the precedent that holds the most hope inside an otherwise grim situation. The year is 2017. The fight game is heavyweight. A boxer with a morality clause activation that was significantly more serious than anything the champion has ever done. We are talking about conduct that genuinely had federal observers in the room paying attention. Fought the clause in private arbitration and won. He did not win on the merits. He absolutely engaged in the conduct he was accused of. He won on a purely procedural ground. The promoter had failed to send the cure period notice in the contractually required form. That single procedural defect saved the entire agreement. The boxer kept the entire deal. Every fight, every guarantee, every bonus. All because the notice envelope was addressed incorrectly, sent via the wrong delivery method, or signed by an officer who did not have the contractual authority to sign that specific category of notice. So if Claressa Shields has a genuinely sharp lawyer on retainer, and the job description for that lawyer in this exact moment is to comb through every notice, every email, every certified letter, every fax confirmation, every messenger receipt, looking for any procedural defect that voids the cure mechanism, then there is a narrow but real corridor to neutralizing the clause entirely. Narrow, friend, but real. Razor thin, but it exists. And in a billion-dollar industry built on commas and footnotes and properly addressed envelopes, razor thin is sometimes all the room you need to walk through the door, take the win, and move on with your career intact. So, what is actually happening right now at the precise moment I am recording this for you? Allegedly, there is a 4-party negotiation unfolding inside a conference room in Midtown Manhattan. Or possibly a Zoom. Or, more realistically, some hybrid of both that involves several lawyers walking the hallway with the phone on mute and a junior associate fielding the document exchange in a separate window. The parties in the room are Salita Promotions' legal team, Wynn Records' legal team, the legal team representing Claressa Shields. And this is the detail nobody is putting on the table publicly. A 4th chair is occupied by the contracts division at DAZN. Because DAZN, the streaming engine that makes the broader economics of women's boxing pencil out at all, does not want this deal to collapse. DAZN has poured marketing dollars into the women's boxing pipeline. DAZN has rebuilt schedules around Claressa's calendar. DAZN has cultivated audience expectations across multiple territories on the back of this contract. DAZN has, in some markets, gone live with promotional creative that featured the original deal architecture. And DAZN, allegedly, is the party at the table actively pushing for a negotiated walkdown rather than a clean termination. A walkdown that lets Salita save face publicly, that lets Wynn Records exit quietly without legal noise, that lets Claressa preserve enough of the bonus structure to avoid financial devastation, and that lets DAZN keep the broadcast infrastructure intact for the next quarter's programming. That is the deal being assembled in real time, while you and I are sitting here talking about it. And the configuration of that walkdown will be visible in public the moment the next press release goes live. How are you going to know when the walkdown actually lands? Track the language. You are going to know it landed the moment the second fight gets announced. Read the press release with surgical attention. If the press release uses the words, "in partnership with Wynn Records," the original deal survived intact and somebody, somehow, talked the room off the ledge. If the press release uses the words, "presented by Salita Promotions," with no mention of Wynn Records anywhere in the copy when walked quietly, without a press cycle. If the press release stops referencing the previously announced 2-year, 4-fight structure entirely and pivots to language about a one-off bout or a showcase event, the contract has been fully restructured behind the scenes, and what you are watching is the public-facing skeleton of the new agreement. And if the press release contains any phrase resembling a celebration of Claressa Shields' historic legacy, Friend, that is the soft launch grammar that gets deployed immediately before a retirement announcement gets dropped on the public. That is the language pattern. That is the tell. Watch for it like a hawk. But while you are watching for it, let me put one more piece in front of you, because the texture of the cure period question gets dramatically more interesting the deeper you look at it. The form of notice required under most boxing promotional contracts is not a generic email or a casual letter. It is typically a registered mail dispatch sent to a specific address on file, with simultaneous copy to legal counsel of record, with delivery confirmation, with a 72-hour window for receipt acknowledgement, and with a precise recital of the triggering conduct attached as an exhibit. If even one of those procedural requirements fails, wrong address on file because Claressa moved her business mailing during the deal term, wrong counsel of record because Claressa changed lawyers without filing the update with the company, missing exhibit, missing confirmation, missing certified copy to the agent of record, anything, the clock never legally started ticking. Which means a legal team operating at peak sharpness right now is doing two things simultaneously. Thing 1, they are searching for any procedural defect in any notice that may have already been sent. Thing 2, they are quietly updating Claressa's address of record, counsel of record, and any related administrative filings to make any subsequent notice harder to deliver correctly. Both moves are entirely legal. Both moves are entirely standard. And both moves buy weeks of additional runway during which a settlement can be negotiated from a much stronger position than the one currently held. That, allegedly, is the chess match unfolding in the background while the rest of the internet is still arguing about the toaster cosplay and whether the purple dress was satire or sincerity. There is one more layer I want to put underneath all of this, because it matters for understanding why Salita Promotions might decide to swing the hammer rather than negotiate the walkdown. And this is the layer nobody on the boxing commentary side seems willing to talk about. The reputation of Salita Promotions inside the broader boxing economy is built almost entirely on stability. Dmitry Salita has spent over a decade cultivating an identity as the promoter who shows up, who pays on time, who keeps the trains running, and who does not let his marquee names burn the building down. That stability is the entire pitch Salita makes to every new fighter who walks into the office for the first time. Stability is the brand. If Claressa's public behavior continues to deteriorate, if the live stream meltdowns continue, if the public-facing contradictions continue, then Salita's brand value as the stability promoter starts to absorb damage by association. Other promoters start whispering. Other fighters start asking questions. Other broadcast partners start factoring in the reputational risk premium when they price future deals. At some point, and reasonable people inside the industry can debate exactly where that point sits, the internal math flips on Dmitry Salita personally. The math flips from preserve the Shields deal because it pencils out economically to activate the clause because the reputational damage to Salita Promotions is starting to outpace the upside of keeping the contract alive. Once that math flips, the clause gets pulled. Quickly. Decisively. Without a goodbye text and without a public-facing explanation that goes any deeper than the parties have decided to part ways amicably. And here is the cruel irony Claressa Shields needs to understand sitting in whatever vacation rental she is sitting in right now. The longer the public behavior continues, the closer that math flips. Every additional live stream, every additional cryptic billionaire status post, every additional unforced contradiction in the Nigeria timeline, every additional moment where the casual fan opens up Twitter, sees a Shields headline in the trending sidebar, and groans before clicking. Each of those moments shifts the internal calculus inside Salita's office one click closer to the activation decision. Which means the most useful single piece of advice anybody could give Claressa right now is the advice that is the hardest for any high-profile athlete to actually follow: sit down. Disappear from the internet. Let the cure window expire quietly. Let the public attention drift to the next news cycle. Give Salita Promotions a reason to not pull the trigger. Because right now, Claressa is, paradoxically, the only person on the planet who can talk Claressa Shields into a contract termination. Salita Promotions cannot do it without her cooperation. The public cannot do it without her cooperation. Wynn Records cannot do it without her cooperation. She is the variable. The clause is loaded. The trigger is sensitive. And the finger on it is, paradoxically, her own. There is another precedent worth mentioning before we close the file on the historical record, and this one is from outside boxing because the analytical lessons translate directly. In 2018, a reality television franchise activated a morality clause against one of its lead cast members after a series of off-camera incidents that the network had managed to keep out of the trade press. The cast member, advised by reasonably competent counsel, immediately took two actions. First, they entered a publicly visible wellness arrangement, not a treatment center exactly, but something close enough that any morality clause invocation would look optically aggressive against a person actively addressing the underlying behavior pattern. Second, their team coordinated a series of low-temperature, family-oriented public appearances that gradually shifted the audience perception away from the inciting conduct over the course of 3 to 4 months. Within 4 months, the network quietly withdrew the morality clause notice, and the cast member's contract continued without interruption. That is the rehabilitation playbook in its cleanest form. Take a publicly visible posture of self-correction. Coordinate sympathetic optics. Make it expensive in the public square for the company to pull the clause. It works in entertainment. It has worked in sports. It has worked in music. And it would, almost certainly, work for Claressa if her team could organize the moves quickly enough and disciplinedly enough. The question is whether the team currently around Claressa is operating at that level of strategic sophistication. That is a question I genuinely cannot answer for you with confidence. But it is a question worth holding while you watch the next 30 days unfold. Let's also be honest about the role that gender plays and how morality clauses get enforced against female fighters specifically. Because the historical record on this is not flattering, and pretending it would be intellectually dishonest. Female fighters in combat sports have, on average, been held to a measurably stricter behavioral standard by their promoters and broadcast partners than male fighters of comparable stature. The same live stream meltdown that gets dismissed as personality from a male fighter gets categorized as instability from a female fighter. The same backstage altercation that gets reframed as fight week intensity from a male competitor gets framed as a character problem from a female competitor. The same contradictions in personal timeline that get treated as branding evolution for a male champion get treated as credibility issues for a female champion. That double standard is real. That double standard is documented. And that double standard means the morality clause sitting inside the $8 million deal is, in practical effect, more likely to be invoked than the same clause would be against a male fighter with an identical behavior pattern. That is not a defense of any specific behavior. It is a recognition of the institutional weight pressing down from above. And it is one of the reasons why the negotiation in that Midtown conference room is moving faster than the public realizes, because the people in the room understand the optics of how the morality clause activation will be reported. And they understand the gendered framework that will shape the coverage. There is one final wrinkle I have been holding back, and I want to share it now because it changes the entire risk profile of the situation in a way that should make every member of her inner circle uncomfortable. Most modern morality clauses in boxing also contain a third-party harm provision tucked somewhere into the operational definitions section. The third-party harm provision says that the triggering conduct does not have to involve the talent directly. It can also be triggered by conduct of the talent's immediate associates, business partners, or representatives that brings disrepute upon the brand association. In other words, if anybody currently sitting inside Claressa's inner circle were to engage in conduct that became public, a podcast appearance gone wrong, a leaked text exchange, an arrest, a live stream of their own that goes off the rails, a domestic incident reported in a police blotter, a financial dispute that ends up in small claims court, that conduct could trigger Claressa's morality clause without Claressa ever having done anything new. The clause has a wider radius than the public assumes. The clause is not just monitoring the talent. The clause is monitoring everybody within a 6-foot circle of the talent. Which means anybody close to Claressa who has any history of impulsive public behavior is now, effectively, a liability vector that needs to be insulated from any situation that might produce a public record incident. That is a hard truth. That is a brutally hard truth, actually. But it is the actual operational reality of how these provisions function inside the modern enforcement environment. There is also, and this is the piece I have been saving for last, a quiet provision in many of these contracts that allows the company to commission an independent reputational impact assessment at the talent's expense once a triggering event has been formally noticed. That assessment is, in practice, a survey conducted by a third-party research firm that measures shifts in audience favorability, sponsor confidence, and broadcast partner enthusiasm in the weeks following the inciting conduct. The cost of those assessments runs anywhere from $75,000 to $250,000, depending on scope. And once the assessment is in, the data becomes the evidentiary backbone of the company's enforcement decision. If the numbers come back ugly and behavioral research firms have gotten dramatically better at quantifying reputational drift over the last 5 years, then the company essentially walks into the negotiation with a binder of empirical evidence supporting the activation. That binder is hard to argue against in arbitration. That binder is even harder to argue against in front of a jury if litigation ends up there. So one of the additional procedural moves a sharp legal team would make right now is to file a preemptive challenge against the methodology of any commissioned reputational assessment before the assessment can be completed. That move is technical, it is expensive, and it requires lawyers who specialize in this exact intersection of contract law and consumer research methodology. But it is a real move. And it can blunt the enforcement timeline by another 60 to 90 days while the methodology dispute gets worked out. So circle back with me to where we started. Track the language coming out of the next press release. Track the partner logos on the next promotional poster. Track whether the broadcast partner credit shifts in any direction. Track whether the announced fight count matches the original announcement. Track whether the press release language softens around legacy themes. Track whether the language pivots towards showcase or one-off framings. The morality clause is loaded. The cure period may already be quietly ticking somewhere inside a 30-day envelope nobody on the outside can see. The walkdown is being negotiated as we speak in a room nobody is photographing, with a streaming partner sitting in a chair nobody is acknowledging publicly. And the historical receipts, the precedents, the case law, the rehabilitation playbooks, the procedural defect defenses, the third-party harm provisions, the reputational impact assessment methodology, every one of them is on the table right now, being read by lawyers who have done this exact dance before in other configurations. The champion is one well-placed phone call away from neutralizing the clause through a procedural challenge. She is also one live stream away from accelerating the activation past the point where any procedural challenge can save the deal. The difference between those two outcomes is, at this moment, a function of choices she has not yet made publicly. Which means the next 30 days are, quite literally, the most consequential 30 days of her career outside the ring. Let me give you one final framework before I let you go, because frameworks are how you remember complicated material long after the video ends. There are exactly 4 possible outcomes from where we sit right now. Outcome 1. The cure period passes quietly, the behavior stabilizes, no notice was ever sent in proper form, and the deal continues largely intact. Probability, in my assessment, sitting somewhere around 25%. Outcome 2. The walkdown gets negotiated. The headline number drops from 8 million to somewhere between 3 and 5 million. Wynn Records exits the deal. Additional fights get added on the back end. And Claressa Shields keeps her career trajectory mostly intact. Probability, somewhere around 45%. This is the modal outcome in my view. Outcome 3. The clause activates fully. The deal terminates, clawback obligations kick in, and the next 18 months involve litigation, arbitration, and a forced rehabilitation arc on undercard fights. Probability, around 20%. Outcome 4. A procedural defect gets identified, the cure mechanism gets challenged in arbitration, the champion wins on procedure, and the deal continues with the company eating the legal costs of its own mistake. Probability, around 10%. Those 4 buckets, in my professional assessment, account for essentially the entire probability mass. Pick the one you think most likely. Drop your verdict in the comments. Let the room argue. Drop your verdict in the comments. Do you think Claressa Shields fights the clause, settles the clause, or escapes through the procedural notice defect we discussed? Pin the sharpest legal theory you can find. Subscribe so you're in the room when the next announcement drops, because the moment that press release goes live, the entire structure of the deal gets revealed in real time, and we are going to be reading every line together, partner by partner, comma by comma. The morality clause is loaded. The morality clause is loaded. The morality clause is loaded. The paper trail walks free the second the contract closes its protective window. I will catch you on the next one. Out.